What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast. You're in for a treat today. This gentleman brings a ton of knowledge, a ton of reading love, which I am all about, and he is an author as well. Dr. Craig Dowden is a highly respected executive coach with Forbes Coaches Council, as well as an award-winning speaker who delivers interactive, evidence-based workshops that translate the science of leadership, team, and organizational excellence into everyday practice. He's the author of Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership, and A Time to Lead, Mastering Yourself So You Can Master Your World. Craig has been featured in top-tier leadership and business publications, including Forbes, Fast Company, the Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and so many more. Craig, I am so delighted to have you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jim, and it's awesome to be here. I love chatting about leadership and appreciate your passion for it and creating the opportunity for this discussion. So,
well, I feel blessed because like we were talking off air, kindred souls and spirits when it comes to this work. I love leadership. I'm passionate about it. And you've written a couple books. Let me just start with the real basic softball question. How and why is leadership? Why is that so important to you? Where did you develop such a passion for this subject?
well, thanks for asking about the origin story. That's an awesome place to to start. And growing up, I think for me, it was really, I was always fascinated by what makes people tick. And so that different people would have different perspectives on the same situation. And everyone has different personalities. And so that was always endlessly fascinating for me. And then when I got to university and then got exposed to organizational psychology, business psychology, and then realizing, hey, businesses have personalities, their cultures, and leaders have personalities, and you mix them into a blender, and I'm probably never going to be bored because it's just this fascinating interplay. And so fortunately, I was right. I just absolutely love what I do. I share your passion, JM. And for me, the reason I love leadership is that the impact that leaders have on so many people's lives is so profound. And the levers that they pull really significantly influence their reality. So I just love having the chance to have conversations like this and work with leaders and aspiring leaders in terms of how they can have the maximum positive impact.
Well, you said a couple things that are so interesting. I'm excited to dive into this. You said each business has their own personality and culture, and then we're going to mix in these fascinating creatures called human beings. Wow, voila, you can have an explosion of awesomeness or of, oh shit. What? Talk to me about the personality. And I talk about culture frequently on this show, so I can't wait to get your take on that. Talk about the personality of a company. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I can already see we're kindred spirits because you use the phrase explosion of awesomeness. So that's something that I'm going to borrow. So I think that's absolutely fantastic and give you due credit, JM. The personality of an organization, really, its culture, they're intertwined. And I think what's really, because essentially it's what are our tendencies? How do we interact, right? What are the things that we pay attention to and not pay attention to? And what I love about the intersection, I think it's so powerful and often get missed. And you see this countless examples for me in my coaching practice, and I'm sure you see it as well, Jam, in your work, that, well, you can have an individual with personality X, put them into organization Y. It's fantastic. As you say, it's an explosion of awesomeness. Then they move to another organization that has a different personality. Wow, what a struggle. It's really, really challenging for them, for the organization. And I think there's just so much tremendous potential. When we get that right, there are amazing results. When it's a bad fit, and a lot of times we focus on role as opposed to, so what's the environment in which we're going to fulfill that? That is the secret sauce. That is what can be missed. And it's not the technical expertise or the technical requirements. It's all around, well, how do I jive? How do we jive in this conversation, right?
Yeah, there's always a feel to it and a gut feel, which so often we're like, oh, gross or great, right? Immediately came on screen and I was like, okay, looking at your bookshelf, I'm feeling this energy. And I knew like, okay, this is going to be great, to your point. as a leader, as a potential employee going to a place, how much goes into that feel versus asking specific, like pointed questions about their culture? I'm just curious because we're all trying to get this right. The employer's trying to find the right fit. The employee is trying to find the right fit and compensation, of course, but it's so darn tricky. And I'm curious, Craig, why can't it just be easier? How do we get it to where it's like, look, this is who we are, this is what we represent, you would be a great fit, or ooh, not feeling it? Well, how do we screw this up so often?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'll start with that one and go backwards, because I think the challenge sometimes and oftentimes is when the organized. So I'm really excited about hiring you. I think you're an absolute rock star. Can't wait to bring you on board. And then what the organization starts to do is say, now what story do I need to tell JM so that he's gonna be interested? And then I get less focused on, and I love what you talked about, because that's it, right? When we have those honest conversations about who we are, what we value, and the impact we want to have, the sky's the limit. Beyond the sky's the limit. Yet then organizations can do themselves and their candidates a disservice by trying to tell a particular story. And same in the reverse. I'm looking for a role. I'm excited about joining, let's say it's Google or Zoom, right? Like, I want to be part of a blue chip organization. Now there are things that come out about the role or the team dynamics, or even people who I know who have worked there before, and it doesn't suit me. It doesn't sit right. And yet I power through. I kind of don't provide the authentic answer to the question. I minimize or deflect during the conversation. And I think you're so right, because when we have those honest conversations, those authentic discussions, well, now we can really accomplish something special. And it's up to each of us. And I do a lot of coaching, and I coach executive MBAs and MDAs. And that's one of the discussions, high potentials. It's that, well, you know what? The more authentic we are, then what can happen is that we can self-select out more effectively, and so can the potential employer. Because if it's, you know what, this isn't going to work, well, it's better not to continue to waste our time and theirs trying to find a way. If there are really core values, core goals that we have that are misaligned, let's just stop. And I love your question as well earlier, so I really want to answer, because it is a bit of both, right? It's that feel. That's what makes it so complex. This is why I love studying what I studied, psychology and business. It's that intuitive feel, yet there's a lot of data we can gather. We can go on websites like Glassdoor. We can go on LinkedIn and figure out who's worked there and reach out and talk to them. And then pair that up with our experience. You and I are having a conversation today. So how does it feel when I'm engaged with you? How much of a match is it? And so all of those things can be immensely valuable for us getting a really good piece of insight in terms of what opportunities are in front of us.
Yeah, you've mentioned a word a couple times, and I want all the leaders to hear this, because I'm curious. I have formulated my own opinion and thought on what this is, but I can't wait to get Craig's on this. You've said the word role at least 2 or 3 times. And what I'm hearing, brother, is as a leader, I'm trying to fill a role. And so I'm like, all right, let's say John Smith. John Smith, I'm going to try and fit him into this role. But let's say John is wildly talented, but just not for that role. Often I see that they'll pass on this person, even though he'd be an amazing fit for the company, because John Smith doesn't fit that role. Therefore, I'm just going to keep searching for the role. What is your guidance, thought, opinion on this, brother? Because I feel like I hire John Smith if he's the right guy, and I figure it out, kind of Bill Belichick style for those American football fans. I'm guessing maybe you're a hockey fan being in Canada.
That's right.
Think of, do I hire John and figure it out? Or what do you suggest, Craig?
Yeah, amazing question, JM. And I think, and to build on that, and I'm with you as well. It's the Southwest, right? Airlines, hire for attitude, train for skill. When you have someone who have those intangibles, like that high level of EQ, that strong presence, the ability to engage and persuade people, the ability to learn quickly, Resiliency, another really critical quality, right, that we're looking for. And then putting them in the role, awesome. So let's worry less about what they bring in right out of the gate. What's their upside potential? Because this is the other challenge, right, that hiring managers, executives get into. Well, I'm just going to do a cold look at your resume, and I'm going to look at, well, where did you work? What did you do? And what did you accomplish? And missing the all important question that you set up right at the beginning, Jam, is what's the fit? Like, am I actually going to thrive in these conditions? And so the only caveat to that is going to be, as well, as a hiring manager, what's the runway? So when you're onboarding someone, you have a certain runway about when do you need them to start to perform? Like, what's their performance capacity and how quickly is that? And then also, what's the delta between what you need and the time that you have and their ability to do that? All of those questions can be really helpful because, to your point, so many amazing high potentials are discarded because they don't have one thing on their resume, or now in the age of kind of digital sorting of CVs, that one word didn't show up and they're gone. And we're missing extraordinarily talented and motivated individuals. And I'm with you, bring them in and create the magic, or even create a whole new role to be able to access their talent.
So I love what you said specific to resiliency, grit, or persistence, whatever word we want to put around it. How do you figure out if somebody is resilient? Are there behavioral interview questions that I could say, all right, Craig, are you resilient? Craig says, yes. Well, that's not a great question, right? Say, Craig, what is your best example of resiliency? Are there other questions? Because I agree with you. I literally will take that quality over anything on their resume. If I know that you'll work until the job gets done, I want that. But how do we figure that out, brother? How do we figure out if they have it or not?
Yeah, I think a great interview question. I think there are fantastic psychometric assessments that you can utilize that can give fantastic insight into this, and personality assessments. Interview-based question, one of them would be, tell me about a failure. Tell me about the largest challenge. Tell me about the largest setback that you've encountered in your career. And now what's really interesting about that, and notice that, I leave that open-ended. I want to learn about. Now, if someone says, I've never had a setback, that's good insight. So, because another question is, if you've never had a challenge in your life, what are you going to be like when you've had one? Pretty well everyone has had a challenge. The biggest challenge you've had, setback in your career. Now, here's what's cool. You listen to how they describe it. So what was it about it? Do they give you lots of great detail? Do they really try to minimize and pivot, right? And draw attention away from it? And here's the other really cool thing that resilient people do. They'll also tell you about what they learned and how they applied that in the future. And I think that is absolutely awesome, because now it just doesn't stop with, hey, I had this terrible setback, this failure. Here's what I learned from it. And here's what I've taken forward from it. And there's lots of great ways. Another really interesting one is to ask, how do you develop yourself? What are some concrete things that you do to develop yourself? And I've done executive interviews and people say, well, actually, I'm fortunate to be at this stage in my career where I know everything, and I'm happy to share, just dispel my knowledge to everyone around me. Well, resilient people are going to say, hey, to your point, right? I've got a big bookshelf. I go to webinars. I subscribe to great podcasts like this one. This is, now you get some more insight into, this is someone who's going to keep going, keep learning, and want to push themselves into test the limits of their potential.
Oh man, I love that. And it's how do you develop yourself? If they're like, I'm good, guess what? Growth mindset is part of your culture. Add higher, step away. I don't care what the resume says. It doesn't matter. I want to get into positive leadership, but I have to ask one more question because we're on this culture feel. Does it ultimately start with I'll say CEO, just because that's the title that I'll come up with for this moment. Does it start at the top, developing that culture, and come down? Or is it literally peer leadership that is creating this culture? Because I just experienced something recently where I was absolutely astounded by watching this leader, and the culture was palpable in a very positive way, and it reflected the leader. I've also seen organizations, and it reflects the leader in the negative way. So does it start there, brother? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the leaders certainly have a profound impact on the culture, on the energy within the organization, and there's research that supports that, right? So what does the evidence show us? Well, the evidence shows us that the leader of teams have a disproportionate impact on the mood of everybody around. So if I show up and I slam, the file folders on the chair, on the table, and say, how the hell are we ever going to get out of this? Well, guess what? This is a really challenging circumstance, right? People are going to be in fear-based mode. They're going to catch that mood versus, hey, everyone, we've got a challenge in front of us. We've got a tight deadline here. I need all of us to pull together and figure this out. But you know what? I know we've got what it takes around this table. So let's go win, right? And that is the difference. And so what's interesting, and I love your question as well, because the CEO, the person in the corner office, people look up to see how to behave around here. That's just the way it goes. So if the CEO is engaged in a lot of challenging behaviors, they're really negative, toxic, hostile, abusive, aggressive, that's going to be catchy because people, especially if they want to move up the ladder, they're going to emulate the CEO. It's still possible, though. I've seen organizations where the CEO, toxic leader, not doing a great job. Yet positive leaders can kind of buffer. So they protect their division, their area from the more toxic energy. This is really draining. It's challenging to do, yet it's possible because what I can do as the SVP, the EVP, I can sit down and say, hey, so what do we need to do to build a great culture? What can we do to ensure that we have positive exchanges, healthy conflict, so we can support each other? And here's the other really cool thing that sometimes happens in those cultures. Their results go through the roof. They do really, really great. And people start to get curious about what's going on in JM's team. Like they're just killing it and there are other divisions not doing as well. Let's go over and talk to them. So even within a quote unquote toxic system, you can really have healing effects.
Yeah, guys, and there's a shelf life to what Craig just said. Like, what's going to happen? Because when there's a subculture that you create with the positive leader, and to his point, people will start to take notice what's going on, and they will either come along the company. There will be removal of that toxic leader, or you will eventually leave. And I've experienced that. And Craig, I'm so glad you said that because there is a overall culture, then there's subcultures, and then there's subcultures. And being clear on that is so important. I want to talk about positive leadership because A, I love the word positivity. B, I love leadership. So when you put those things together, I'm like, all right, you've mastered this. You've written a book about not only just the idea, but the science behind it. Talk to me about that book and what you found with positive leadership. What is the takeaway that if I'm listening, I'm like, okay, I think I'm a realistic leader. No, let's be a positive one. And why do I want to do that, Craig?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reason that, and it was the motivation behind writing the book, because in my coaching work, I had conversations with leaders around, well, you know what? I've got a choice in front of me. I can be nice. My results are going to suffer, or I'm going to drive extraordinary results. And you know what? It's not going to be, it's not going to be a positive place. And for me, that was why I wanted to pursue my PhD in psychology and business, the research. There is overwhelming data that supports the fact that when you do good, you lead well. These things aren't in competition with one another. They are in cooperation. They are necessary ingredients. You put them together, it's an exponential effect. And so I wanted to write that book such that, and present the business case, because that's what it is, because people say, oh, well, it's just touchy-feely stuff. No, there's hard data. There's a very strong business case that doing the right thing is not just the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do for your organization. And I love that because positive leaders, like people who are excited about leadership, Jam, like yourself, and those that are inspired to make the world a better place, they get it. What I was also motivated by is, hey, let's bring out the evidence. So going back to your example, so that here's the science that's not just been done in one organization. These are thousands of organizations with millions of leaders and employees from around the world. So it's challenging to say, all right, if you want to build a toxic culture, that's fine. If you think fear is going to work, look at all the evidence that suggests the opposite.
Yeah. Do you have some examples? I mean, I can come up with a couple. Like Lee Iacocca immediately comes to mind, right? And again, there's that shelf life where boom, exploded, and then the ego, the fear-based, the I am. And again, sorry, Lee, it's an example I can think of. But do you have some? Because you mentioned Southwest earlier with that hire for attitude, train for skill. I think that's so, when we can visualize it and see it and feel it. Do you have some other examples you'd be willing to share where you're say, this is a positive leader where we want to model our behavior similar to what they're doing?
Well, I'm thrilled you answered this question, and I'll apologize to the book reference for my next book, because I had the profound privilege of collaborating with Alan Mulally. He's the legendary former CEO of Ford Motor Company and Boeing commercial airplanes. And he charted an extraordinary career. So when he took over Ford, just to give some insight on this, the stock price, I believe, was $1.01. It was $1. And when he left, I think it was 1837. So like an extraordinary turnaround. And how did he do this? By creating the working together management system. And what was that about? So I love your question too about, so what are some concrete things? Because that sounds great. How can we work together? A couple of really key attributes. One of his core foundational principles was people first, love them up. So love was part of the whole philosophy and ethos that he brought to the table. Another really powerful thing this was something you could not get around. Never a joke at someone else's expense. Mm. And I love that because, and he shared this with me, and it's in the book, where he said, people will go along to get along, JM. Yet the impact of making a joke, right, cutting someone down, it's not just in the moment. And I love that you talked about, right, the half-life for that's an extended effect. And then am I going to take a risk? Am I going to share an innovative idea? And so this is all part of all of these practices. Qualities are a part of the working together management system. And the last thing that he shared was around, or one other thing that he shared, there's so much, is that you can't manage a secret. And so within the working together management system, it was not only encouraged, it was expected that as soon as you had a challenge, you would bring it to the table. You would let people know right away, hey, my division, this project is having a problem. And now we rally together, we work together to figure it out. It's not a career ender. This is a moment for all of us to support each other to achieve extraordinary things.
Yeah, he's fascinating, and I have not spoken to him personally, but I've read about some of his practices. I have to ask you, he was the gentleman that would do a everyday check-in. Every day is my understanding. Not long. It was pretty basic to check in on what's going on to uncover some of these things. But here's the key. Here's what I want everybody to hear. It was every day, and I think it was like 7 or 8 a.m. It was pretty early.
Yep.
He was on every single call. I'm thinking of the right gentleman?
You're absolutely bang on that. And it was at the beginning of the week. They would do other meetings as well. And it was called the business plan review, JM. And you're right on, bang on. And then so every meeting they would show up, and then for all of the different responsibilities, the different projects you were working on, you would just say green, yellow, red. And you would have a color-coded chart, and all the charts would go up. And I would present mine, you would present yours. And here's what's awesome about this system, right? It was expected people would have red colors on their charts. Of course, not everything is perfect. Again, going back to your great question around resilience. And then, so what we would do is talk about the greens, all systems go, yellow being, hey, there are some challenges, but I think I got it. Reds, I'm out of depth here. I need some help. And going back to an example of positive leader, when he came in, there was really a strong culture of fear. People were reluctant to speak up. And so instituted this business plan review. And so what happened? The first several times, all greens, no reds anywhere. And then he was saying, well, hey, we're not doing particularly well. What's going to happen when we're really struggling if it's all greens at the present time? So then someone had the courage, embraced the working together management system, and said, you know what, I'm going to put a red on my chart. And here, this is an amazingly powerful practice for all of your listeners, JM, around. So what did Alan do? When people thought as soon as the red color came up, it's like, oh, the doors are opening, bye-bye, your career's over, that's it. No, he applauded. He actually and said, thank you for that great leadership. That's the transparency we need in order to get us to where we need to go. What an amazing statement. And then as those meetings continued, as you laid out, JM, brought this executive closer and closer to him to show the people around the table, this is valuable behavior. This gets more of my attention and my time, and we can both guess what happened in terms of moving forward.
Well, and what I loved about that is he's there, he's present. He is not, again, there's no judgment. Let's talk about expectations and what do you need for support? We're not going to sweep something under the rug. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with it together. So leaders, I hope you hear this. He was personally present. That's the idea of, you don't ask people to do something you're not willing to do every single day. I think it's remarkable. There's another thing that you talk about, and it's something I talk about openly, and that is authentic leadership. And the first chapter of my book is vulnerability. Okay. And I think authenticity, vulnerability, they really are hand in hand, in my opinion. Talk to me about authentic leadership. What does that look like, and how can we continue to get better at it?
Yeah, I love the linkage between authenticity and vulnerability, because really that's part of it. Letting people in, right, into our own experiences, our own realities, and letting people know, hey, I don't have everything figured out, and I have my struggles and challenges. And this is what's interesting, is that leaders want to create an environment where people will be open and share their challenges with them. And a question I ask is, well, when's the last time you've shared yours? And then how can we possibly expect people to model the behavior that we're unwilling to show? Because they're going to assume, well, we think it's weakness. And I love what you're talking about, JM, in terms of that vulnerability piece, because the best way to get better at vulnerability and authenticity is practice. Put ourselves out there. Do it. Let's borrow the Nike. Just do it. And a fantastic practice that many of my coaching clients will utilize, and this came in especially during the pandemic, early stages in the pandemic, and they've continued, is, as an example, rather than show up with the PowerPoints and the results presentation, they would host what we called, ask me anything sessions. And essentially you just say, hey, what's on your mind? What do you want to hear from me? And for leaders who are used to being buttoned down or having all their talking points, right, it's a wonderful chance to be able to hear right from everybody's perspective in terms of what's happening. What do they want to know? What are they afraid? And the initial few sessions, it was pretty quiet. It was tough to get people to talk, right? Because they're going, what's Craig doing showing up here and saying, ask me anything? You stick with it. Tell people why. Again, back to authenticity. This is why I want to host these sessions, so I can learn from you, so we can learn from each other. And then guess what happened? More people started to share safer questions. Everything was great, no problem. Then there were more challenging questions. And it's a fantastic way. And every single executive that I've worked with who have implemented this, they have said, it felt scary, may have been the scariest thing for me to show up and say, hey, ask me anything. Yet the power and the benefit, I'm never giving this up. Like, I'm not, unless there's a reason for me to dive into Q1 results, we're going to start with ask me anything. And it's a fantastic, fantastic way to build that skill.
Well, you said you're going to borrow one of mine. I'm borrowing yours because I cannot tell you how many times somebody's asked me, and you so succinctly, precisely, and concisely said, the best way to get better is to practice. And it's like, that's so basic and simple and profound. Brother, I'm not kidding. I'm on podcasts a couple times a week. And I get asked that, and I'm like, well, and so I go through all these long, no, you're right. It's just try it on. It's going to be uncomfortable, and then try it on again. I love that. I'm going to guess that this is part of your next book, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but A Time to Lead, Mastering Yourself So You Can Master Your World. Are we diving into the mindset part at that point? And I'm just curious. I'm taking that leap here because I'm obsessed with mindset, but I think so often that story that you're talking about earlier, is that kind of what that is all about, that book?
Well, it's great, you're predicting what the book is looking like, because we talked about resiliency, we've talked about authentic leadership, all different qualities that are covered, and the opening chapter is on mindset. It absolutely is. Great leadership starts with great self-leadership. It's all around mindset, how we view the world, how we interpret our surroundings, the assumptions that we make in terms of the people around us and the situations we're going to face are fundamental. And I also love, JM, that you talked about growth mindset, because that's also one of the one of the most pioneering and groundbreaking areas of research that's been done. And so really talk about how our mindset matters and how it impacts our experience of the world as well as our outcomes. It's not just experience. Because if you and I are walking into this conversation and not seeing the potential within it, we know, oh, this is going to be the most boring podcast discussion ever, and this is not going to work, or, this is never going to work with this potential client or this prospect. Well, guess what? It can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what we want to do is really deconstruct our mindset, learn what triggers move us to a growth versus a more fixed mindset, and then armed with that information, stay in growth mode as often as we can, because there's lots of evidence that shows us when we're in growth mode, we're more likely to capitalize on opportunities, achieve extraordinary results, and our mindset, back to practice, it's something we can do. It's not fixed. We can grow throughout our lifetime. So being aware of that, how it works, and how to pivot, foundational.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier how positive, so often people are like, it's hippity dippity, it's airy fairy, yeah. It's like, but it's not. This is real scientific backed data when it comes to the positivity for the leadership, when we come to the mindset and the growth mindset. My question to you, brother, is why is there such a cynical take on this thought of, hey, when you're positive, good things happen. When you have this growth mindset, you can achieve things far superior. Is it just really shitty hardwiring that people have? I'm just curious, man, because I fight this fight on the daily.
Right.
People often won't say it, but I can feel it. Like, you don't believe what I'm saying. You think it's all fairy dust, but it's not. It's just backed by data. And that's what I love about your work here is you not only know that, so let's just say the fact that it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but here's the science that backs it up. So I guess it's a long question to say, why is that out there? And what are you doing to combat it outside of, I guess, talking about it, writing the books and trying to show these results?
Yeah, and we are kindred spirits, because I love, it's a fantastic question you're asking, right? Which is around, is it just part of our hardwiring? And hey, and this is my Q data. There was an amazing review done, I think it was about 2 decades ago, in the annual review of psychology, with the headline, "Bad is stronger than good." And so what that means is that we are naturally, and I love that's exactly it. Human beings tend to be hardwired towards the negative stimuli. If you go through a 360 review, any leaders that have done a 360 feedback, where you get feedback from your colleagues, your employees, your supervisors, well, guess what? Do people spend time looking at the good stuff? Generally not. They go to the bad, right? I want to figure out, well, where did I go wrong? So this is hardwired into us. And so that's naturally, we just have these misconceptions, because we think, oh, well, when things are, again, when it's nice, we're not going to be motivated enough, right, to do the work that needs to be done. And then what's incredibly powerful, and this is why that's why I get out of bed every morning, is why I love conversations like this, is to have the discussion around, hey, when we do good, when we interact positively with the world around us, with the people around us, amazing things happen. Kim Cameron, he's the co-founder of the Center for Positive Organizations out of the University of Michigan, the top rated, top respected research-based institution in the world around this. And he talks about the heliotropic effect. Human beings are attracted towards light and repel darkness. Like this is in every ecosystem. Every organism is aligned in that way. And so I think sometimes, and going back to one of the points you made earlier as well, which is really important, we tend to make things way more complex, or it's like, no, it can't be nice, because then, that's just disconnected from, we got to work and we got to push and we got to, rough it out. Not at all. When we're positive, when we engage, we build meaningful relationships, when we feel safe. And I love that the opening chapter in your book is on vulnerability, JM. When we're vulnerable with each other, we know exactly who we are. We know what's important to us. We understand when we're affected by others' behavior because we're safe. We feel comfortable sharing that. Now we can rally together and do the important work. And now we can get out there and achieve extraordinary results, because we've left all of that noise, going back to your great question as well about why is it such a mess to get the right people into the roles? Because we're just pretending. We get into that authentic space, that vulnerable space, and we have the courage to do it, and we're surrounded by people that foster that within us. Get out of let's go win.
I love it. Yeah, you plugged that twice, brother. You're a great guest. This is phenomenal. I have to ask, because you mentioned feedback, and I know that's in a chapter of your book of mastering the art of receiving feedback, which, so everyone knows, it's hard, positive or negative, right? Often somebody gives you a compliment and we push it off. So let's talk about that briefly, because I think it's so vitally important for us to grow as human beings, is to master this art. What does that look like, Craig? How do we go about it better so that we receive that feedback? Because that's gold. When people are willing to give it to you, good or bad, in my opinion, I think it's gold. I think we want to receive it. It's not personal. It's just, that's the feedback.
You're bang on. So many great points that you raise. And Ken Blanchard, I believe, said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. and then I remember doing a virtual talk, and someone DM'd me after and said, if feedback is the breakfast of champions, why do few people show up at the table? So I thought that was hilarious and a great point. And what's interesting as well is, once again, you look at the research, you look at leadership development, you look at professional development training. What do most of the courses do? Tell you how to deliver it. Yet coming back again, well, if we want people to receive our feedback, when's the last time we've received theirs? And how have we received it? So that's what I love, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to incorporate that. And I think what's critical, what inspired me, I had the amazing good fortune to speak with Doug Stone. He's the best-selling author of Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. He also has an amazing book called Thanks for the Feedback. And what I love about his approach to it, and he talks about how our egos can get in the way. And here's a really fantastic tip around how to maximize, get the most value out of feedback. Number one is, the key thing to do, most of us go to what's wrong with the feedback. That's the first thing we do. We look to poke holes in it. And then if there's one thing we disagree with, we throw the whole thing out, because, they don't know what they're talking about. And I love that he shared with me, he said, Craig, what's the best question we can ask is what's right about it. And I thought that was just rock star, right? Like, what's right about this feedback? And here's an additional piece that I think is also really critical. And it comes back to mastering our emotions, right? And our mindset around that. To me, when feedback comes in that creates a really strong defensive reaction, initial reaction, that's the stuff we want to sit with for longer. There's probably gold in that, because what it's doing is challenging my identity. It's challenging something, the way in which I'm viewing myself, which is prompting that really strong negative reaction. So I want to sit with that longer and sit with that question longer. What could be right about this? And then the last thing I want to share, and I love the different components you put into the question, JM, which is around this. Just because we receive feedback from someone and receive it well, doesn't mean we have to agree with it or do anything with it. You can tell me something and I can sit with it, it can sting, and then I decide, you know what? No, I disagree with JM. Here's the power, though, of opening ourselves up to that conversation. Now, when you react poorly in the future, I understand. And it's an informed choice that I'm making. I'm empowering myself rather than, well, why is JM upset again? I can't believe, what's his problem? No, now I'm intentionally choosing, which makes it more empowering. I'm less frustrated. And now it enables me to enact strategies that'll help me achieve the things that are most important.
It's a fascinating subject. And again, guys, I understand when somebody gives you feedback and it stings, we get defensive. It's literally, again, hardwired in us as human beings. That's the fight or flight. We're going to fight back. But the truth is, when it comes to this, when somebody gives you that authentic feedback, like Craig said, you don't have to agree. You don't have to do anything, but you should thank them. Thank you for the opportunity for giving me that. Thank you so much. And here's the other thing. If they were trying to harm you, you disarm them immediately when you just say thank you. By the way, same with receiving compliments. Thank you. Don't discount what they're telling you. Oh man, you have so many good things. All right, I have to ask, I'll be bothered if I don't. What do you think the future of leadership looks like? What if I'm a leader listening right now and I'm like, I'm in a leadership position. I want to get better. I want to be at the cutting edge. What does that look like, Craig?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, and with the great resignation, quiet quitting, all these trends that are coming through, what's at the heart of that? I think we're really at a critical juncture right now, and humanistic leadership and that self-mastery is going to be more important now than ever before. And also in the age of technology, if we feel more comfortable interacting with computers than we do with our leaders, we're in trouble. So what's the ultimate competitive advantage for us as human beings? Well, it's the art of conversation. It's the art of connection and drawing on the research around that. So how can I best impact, and how can I best communicate, and how can I best relate? Because what's driving these behaviors when people leave organizations, and you talked about it before, I don't feel understood, I don't feel cared for by my leader. So practicing these skills that we've talked about, those leadership qualities, mastering our mindset, our emotions, authenticity. I love that that's something that you really focus on, Jan, and that vulnerability. Let people know who you are. Let them be inspired to follow you, because that's what's going to cut through the noise in this environment and into the future. People want to trust the people they lead. And they want to know what you stand for, why you stand for it, and where you want us to go. That is awesome. And that takes work. That takes reflection and commitment and communication and connection. That's the future of leadership for me.
You've heard connection several times, guys. So if you've heard that these were the soft skills, trust me, I don't care what you call them. These are the skills. This genuine human connection is vitally important, as you said, even as artificial intelligence comes more and more about, look, it's going to be that other human being that we are going to be able to move mountains. What didn't I know enough to ask you, Craig? It's something I'll just give you that open forum where you're like, man, I want to leave this with the audience before we start to wrap up.
Well, I think I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Jim. Your passion for positive leadership certainly comes through, and create an environment to bring the best out in others. And if I went through a list of questions I'd hope we would cover, then I've covered them all and then some. And what I most appreciate, I have to say, your authenticity, how you've shown up, your genuine curiosity. And so this has been an absolute blast for me. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and this just went beyond my expectations. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation and being part of your community.
Well, we're blessed to have you, man. And I so love it. I can't wait for people to go check you out. So speaking of checking you out and connecting with you, where's the best place for them to connect with you online, find your books, just be a part of Craig's world?
Sure. Well, thank you. CraigDowden.com is a great way to connect, and lots of resources there. If you reach out, I'm on LinkedIn, so an active presence on LinkedIn. Tell me Jan sent you, so I'll send a special message back. And would love for you to be a part of. I have a podcast as well and webinar series. And the book that's coming out, it's September 13th. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So stay tuned there, and really appreciate continuing the conversation.
You're awesome, brother. I appreciate the way you showed up. So many nuggets. I try not to say that word, but it's true. There's just so many tangible takeaways for leaders, for prospective leaders. I just so good, Craig. So thank you, brother, for being here and just bringing the energy the way you did.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to let's go win.
Better plugging than I am. So I'll give a shameless plug. Let's go win. Please go share this with your people, review it, subscribe. We're trying to grow this podcast, but you know why? Because we have amazing guests like Craig. So get it out to your people. And as he said, you guys, mindset matters. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.